when we talk about recharging the batteries, you know, I think that I have a few different thoughts on this. And I think that personally for myself, it's been definitely like a few really difficult years. And I think it has been for a lot of people. And not because, Hedera is down or HBAR is down in price or whatever. I think it's more so, this is a really hard industry to be in. And when I say industry, I mean the technology industry. Lots of layoffs, lots of change, AI has been rocked. Computer science degrees are, people are being told they're worthless now, and hiring's down and people are getting laid off. And it's a really, really crazy time. And I think that when I look back at December 2020 or January 2020, when I bought my first HBAR after I had seen the Lehman Harvard talk and kind of got into it, I think that like a lot of people, you kind of go, there's no turning back now. You kind of discover something where you go, not only did I rediscover the crypto industry and rediscover the tech industry in a way, but also looking at all this new stuff, Hedera, Hashgraph, all this incredible technology, and it just sucks you in. And you really can't see yourself doing anything else. There is no plan B. And I made the decision pretty decisively that this is what I wanted to do full time. And what that takes is like, especially in a bear market, all these different things like struggling to pay rent for years, keep food on the table, and always kind of looking in the peripheral and kind of being like, what if I just, stepped out of the Hedera ecosystem and got a regular 9 to 5 or whatever? It would alleviate so much pressure. It would solve so many problems. What if I put my efforts elsewhere? And I think that a lot of people took that route. And I think a lot of respect to those people. I mean, there's so many great developers, artists, creators, founders in the Hedera ecosystem that kind of disappeared over the last couple of years because they had to pay their rent. They had to put food on the table. They had to do all these different types of things. And so that's really hard. And I think that a lot of the people that are still around, I'm not a wealthy guy. I think that it's been a tough stretch over the last few years. And so for me, reflecting on all that, and looking back, there's a common meme that people say where it's like, oh, when things turn around, when the bull market comes in and everyone's making money, people will say like, oh, you're so lucky for getting in. But people don't see the really, a lot of the hardship that goes into a lot of this stuff. It's tough sometimes working in an industry that, that people don't really understand, but, also that people really villainize, that people see do a lot of damage in certain ways, how it's portrayed in the news. So I think the last few years, I've definitely, in a broader sense, I felt alone in a lot of ways, definitely felt drained, burnt out, or uninspired, stressed, having all sorts of issues from that stress, maybe health related or whatever. And I think that I think that, coming out of this and entering this new cycle, I think that it's pretty clear that a lot of people feel the same way. A lot of people are taking a step back. I think that Jack from Kabila, I watched his video this morning, and I think that his video resonated with me quite a bit. He does these morning walk and talks that are great. He goes for a morning walk and he speaks to the community on kind of not necessarily crypto related stuff, but just kind of the more human side of things, which I think is great. But he said something that it turned into feeling like he had to do one of those videos for the morning walk. Like it's an item on the checklist that you have to check off. And that's a problem. And he's like, I don't want to be in that space. And I think that people are burnt out. I think that people are, struggling in a lot of ways. And I think it's most difficult because for me, especially when things start turning around and things start, getting, better, when you are burnt out, when you have used up the tank, used up the battery, it becomes extra difficult because in a lot of ways, it's hard to enjoy the fruits of your labor because you're so burnt out. And I think that, for years, operating, 4 or 5 working groups in the Hedera community, and, having, dozens of high profile people depend on you for that. Also, my own projects, also, working full time, trying to scrape by in the Hedera ecosystem specifically, and all those different types of things. Again, it just grinds you down. And this is a common story in the technology industry. It's a cycle. It is the part that I don't think a lot of people talk about so much, that just really grinds you down. And I think that also on the flip side, the common saying holds true. You can't sharpen a knife on velvet, right? Or, stress and pressure is what turns coal into diamonds. It's like, of course, there is a side to that where it definitely shapes you. It definitely molds you. But I think in a lot of ways, not for the better. And I think in a lot of ways, it's permanent. I think that there's a lot of permanent damage that's done to, people's mental health, physical health. When you're in an industry like this, I don't think it's just temporary. I think that there are things that happen that, you leave scars. And I think that that's the sacrifice that, isn't spoken about a lot. And I think that we see in other industries, when we look at the big famous CEOs like Elon Musk or all these different types of people, you can see that those scars and that damage that gets done in those people. But it's not really talked about a lot. They're essentially portrayed as kind of like indestructible machines that we should aspire to be more like. And I think that a quote that comes to my mind that really kind of, I think, summarizes a lot of this is Paul Graham, who is really famous in Silicon Valley. He's the founder of Y Combinator, co-founder of Y Combinator. Anybody who's in the startup space in technology, or anyone who's been remotely involved in the tech industry in the last 20 years knows of Paul Graham. And he has a great quote that is essentially speaks about the technology train, right? There's this technology train that departs and arrives at the station at regular intervals. And what he means by that is it's these cycles in the technology industry. And it's these cycles also too in the crypto industry, where it's really not in our control. And honestly, it's not in the industry control. Right. And I think that it just kind of goes through these cyclical types of things. Maybe it's affected by what's happening in the rest of the world, but it just happens. And what he means by that is the technology train comes and stops at the station, and it stops at the station for a while, and it gets really hard. And I think that a lot of people just can't, for whatever reason, maybe they aren't cut out for it. Maybe life happens and they can't really kind of, deal with it too much. They kind of leave the train. They get off the train. And the train gets emptier and emptier and emptier. And I think that's a really sad part, because so many of those people, especially in the Hedera ecosystem, are just great people that I haven't talked to again, that I used to talk to all the time. And, the train gets emptier and emptier, but eventually the train leaves the station. And if you can stick it out, you end up potentially with a whole car of the train to yourself as the technology train leaves the station onto the new thing and takes you to the next destination. And that's where a lot of the success comes from, right? A lot of success in the technology industry depends on survival, right? It's like Lehman talks about, right? We post this clip all the time about Lehman when he says, generally you'll have, a lot of different startups, a lot of different things happen. And then a lot of those go out of business and you're left with 5 major ones. And that's what he's talking about. That's what Paul Graham's talking about. And that's what we're kind of experiencing right now. And I think that a lot of it isn't fair. A lot of it is unpredictable. And just, I think that it, in a lot of ways it's a net negative, but it's required. It's like when a forest burns down, it means that new stuff can grow, new trees can grow. But I think it does leave permanent scars. It does take a toll on people. We don't talk about people a lot in this industry. We talk about robots a lot right now. We talk about AI right now. We talk about all of the incredible things that are going to happen by removing humans from the equation. And, I think that's a tough part of this. And so I think that all of that, right? The lack of money, trouble paying rent or your mortgage, putting food on the table, seeing all the news about how great everything's going to be when humans are removed from the process, and all these different types of things. And at the same time, trying to stay with it and on top of everything and continue going. I see these NFT projects. I see these other projects on Hedera. I see these DEXs and companies and individuals just sticking it out. Sometimes doing this show is really hard. There's some weeks where it just takes everything out of me to do the show, but it's all about staying in the game. It's all about that survival. And I think that's really what it's about is when you get through it, it's like, wow, I made it, but you've got an empty battery. And I think that there's a big, big, big risk. And I've made this mistake a lot of times in my career, which is knowing that you can do pretty well on an empty battery. I can do a lot on an empty battery. I have been doing a lot on an empty battery, but the reality is that it isn't sustainable, and it leads to a lot of really difficult stuff. And I think that I'm seeing posts by people in the Hedera community. I'm seeing all sorts of different things. And I'm seeing these different types of posts of people talking about mental health, taking a break. We joke about, I'm going out to touch grass. I'm not seeing a lot of posts like that anymore. It's really kind of like real talk type stuff. There's people that are quitting drinking. There's people that are trying to do these types of things. And I wanted to just use the show this week to kind of put a spotlight on that and, not focus too much on looking back at how hard things were and kind of, a lot of damage that, people in the Hedera community have taken on. I think that it's really easy to ruminate on that. I think that what's important is looking forward, and like we do a lot of times, we try to learn from lessons. We try to learn from failures. We try to continue and not make the same mistakes before. And I think that we do that really well from a community standpoint, from a project standpoint, from an industry standpoint. It's very incredible. But from a human standpoint, from a personal standpoint, in an industry that's less human than ever and trying to become less human as quickly as possible, it can be really easy to kind of forget, that you're human. And I think that that can be a really difficult thing. And so as this technology train leaves the station, as the clouds part and the sun starts shining through a little bit, as we get up a little further on the mountain and the air gets a little more thin, I think that this is where FOMO is really the worst, because I think what we have to do is we have to take the time to recharge the batteries in whichever way we can, because we're going to need that energy. We're going to need that power. And I think that, to this community's credit, to people in this community's credit, there's zero relenting. There's just, the pace has not dropped off. And I'll say that from the community standpoint, from Hedera's standpoint, from the HBAR Foundation standpoint, Hashgraph Association, Swirls Labs, across the board, NFT projects, DeFi projects, everybody. It's just been pedal to the metal. And I think that ultimately that's what's needed. It's not like we can let our foot off the gas, but we got to find some way to recharge the batteries. I'm trying to do that personally right now, because, I can just tell. I just, I don't have it in me. After this crazy few years to not try something different, So I think that that's what I'm seeing a lot of. I'm thinking it's resonating with me. I see, Jack from Kabila, his post and different stuff like that. It resonates with me. I see King Solomon's post about, quitting drinking and stuff. And so I want to encourage that kind of stuff. I want to encourage that human element in the Hedera ecosystem, because I think that we talk about people a lot of times as almost like the biggest problem in Web3. That's what it really boils down to, is a lot of these problems boil down to humans. If there was no humans, I think a lot of this stuff would function flawlessly. It turns out that most of the time it's humans that mess it up. But I think that, I think that right now's a good time to focus on the human aspect of things in this community and really focus on those types of things. That's what I'm trying to do. I'd encourage people to do that as well, because I think it's going to give us the energy to do it. And just to wrap up my thoughts on this, strangely, as some advice, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, who is, the opposite of this, I think has some pretty good advice on this. And I think this is some advice that I've been applying, and that I think other people should be applying in the ecosystem. And Sam Altman doesn't talk about this in a necessarily AI context, more just as a startup founder, business owner, project owner, builder, investor mindset. And what he's found in his experience with all his different companies, working with all sorts of different startups, is that there's a really good way to recharge the battery. And it's a little bit counterintuitive. And, as I've said, people get so burnt out over these last few years in this ecosystem, and naturally you go, well, I need a vacation, or I need to take a break, or I need some time off, or I need to press pause, or I need to step away for a minute, or I need to, those different types of things. And I think that definitely recharges the batteries, but I think it inherently highlights one of the key challenges of the technology industry is you're kind of shackled to it in a way. I think that it's a lie to say that it's, taking a step back from the industry or the ecosystem for a couple of weeks or whatever is not going to put you behind in some way. It's just, that's the reality of it. That's where a lot of the stress and burnout comes from in this industry, is just you cannot get over the reality that is, if you step away for a bit, you will get a little bit behind. That's just the reality of it. So what do we do? And I think Sam Altman kind of outlines this very interestingly. And he says, a really effective way to recharge the battery is understanding that there are certain periods of time in which you do a ton of work and you just experience constant failure. And it's maybe not because what you're doing isn't working. Maybe it's because the industry is going through a cycle. Maybe something's happened outside of your control, but you're constantly putting an effort, constantly surviving, constantly just staying in the game. And, you just have that failure, or not getting that positive feedback loop. Maybe not failing per se, but not seeing big success, not doing something and getting the prize, and doing something and getting the prize. It's just doing. And why am I doing it? And maybe a lot of people in your life being like, why are you doing it? And you're like, at some point you're probably like, I don't know. And so I think that's where it really starts to grind you down. And what Sam Altman highlights is a great way to recharge the battery is maybe not so much stepping away, but putting yourself, your team, your community into a position where you can get some wins, right? It's not so much taking a step back. It's like taking a step to the side. It's taking a little bit of a detour. It's like, listen, we've been on this stretch of freeway forever. We're getting to our destination. It's great, but I'm going insane. I'm seeing the same stuff over and over and over again. It feels like we're literally getting nowhere. You know what? What if we just got off this exit here? I know it'll take us a little longer, but we'll see some trees. We'll see the coast. We'll still get there. And I think that's kind of what it's about, is I think that it's time to try to see if you have a community, if you have a project, or even just yourself, what can you do to put yourself in a situation where you can get a win and just get that taste right now, get that fix. Because there's so many important things we're working on right now that take so long and they grind away. But there's also some stuff that maybe you've neglected, a little project here, an art project there, a little NFT thing, somewhere else. Or maybe something personal, like maybe you're, doing something in the backyard or whatever. But if it's something that can give you a win or that a community can get around, I just think that's a really important thing to do. And so for me, maybe another way to put it is I think that, as, a foot walks on rough terrain for so long, it gets calloused, right? You get out of the rough terrain. It's nice and smooth. How do you feel the opportunities? You got a bunch of calluses on your feet. It's like our mind. We got to do a bit of a mental pedicure. We got to figure out how to get rid of all that's built up, these patterns, these habits, these defense mechanisms, these coping mechanisms that we've relied on to get in a survival place, to get through this stuff, to stay in the game while kind of barely making it through. That's just not going to serve us well going forward. We have to go from survival mode to thrival mode. We have to change. We have to flip the script a little bit, and we have to do it ahead of time. We have to be a little bold with it. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about. Is I'm not talking about taking a step back. It's about taking a step to the side a little bit. It's time to take the scenic route for a minute. It's time to we've been hustling. We're okay. We survived. We don't need to necessarily, pull the car over and have a nap. We can take an exit and take the scenic route for a little bit. And kind of on that, I wanted to maybe put out a thing to the community. Maybe I'll put out a tweet later or something, but, if folks have any suggestions and kind of things that they're doing, to, focus on their mental health, deal with burnout, different things that they're doing. I think let's share some of that stuff with each other, that we're doing in our personal lives or as communities and stuff to get the energy up, to get the positive vibes up, to fill the battery. Because we're not I think that we talk about a lot of times, when the mass adoption happens, when the big moment happens for this network and the masses flood in, the liquidity floods in, we have our, Bored Ape Yacht Club moment or whatever you want to call it. It's we always talk about, was the network going to be ready? Are protocols going to be ready? Is DeFi going to be built out? All these different types of things. And, now I'm thinking more so are the people going to be ready? A lot of people get, illnesses, they get sick, they get colds, they get whatever. It's people are just worn down now, there's a lot of issues, that people are having, in the tech industry as a whole, in this ecosystem. And it's anyone who's made it through that's still in the game. If you have a project, a company, just yourself, and you literally have made it to the other side and you can pay your rent, you've been working full time in Hedera forever. It's honestly, you're at the tip top of the tip top, but take a minute, recharge, recalibrate. Cause we can't, we can't seize the opportunity of mass adoption if the ecosystem isn't built out, for sure. But we can't do it if we all have empty batteries. So what can we do to recharge the battery? What can we do to, enhance, our own position just as humans in this industry that is less human day by day? That's what I'll say on that. Let's recharge the batteries.